I'm James Pastor, Program Director here at Clay Art Center. Thanks for coming. This is our second of 3 ways of making cup demo and giveaway sort of series of little Zoom virtual workshop demos for NCECA. So happy second day of NCECA. It's really exciting. Never thought I'd be doing NCECA all from my computer, but you know, it's really wonderful that we can make it happen to the best of our ability. So thank you for everybody at NCECA. So let's jump in. I am broadcasting here from our resource room and gallery here at Clay Art Center. So if you're new to us, Clay Art Center, we are a community based art center, specifically Clay, located in Portchester, New York. Today, joining us is Breana Hendricks, and Breana is our one of our resident artists, specifically our Westchester fellow, and she is on her first year of her fellowship, and we are very lucky to have her. Last year she was our community arts assistant as well, so Bree's been with us for 2 years and we're very happy to have her, and she's making some beautiful work here. So Bree is going to show you how she makes her cups and the tools and the tricks that she uses and her approach to how she makes. So let's jump into it. So Bree, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, James. Thank you everyone for coming. So excited to teach y'all how I make my cups, demonstrate. So to start, I started making plaster molds at the beginning of my residency. And here's an example of something thrown on the hump. And I decided to make a bisque mold out of this plaster mold. So I prepared some slabs for demo, and I'm going to smooth them out with my red rib here. I'm compressing the clay. I'm getting canvas texture out from using the slab roller, and I'm stretching the clay out just a little bit so it can be a tiny bit thinner. Flip that over. I'm just using stoneware for today, but I normally use a stoneware porcelain mix, like B-mix. So I get that nice translucency sometimes, and I get to have a little bit of structure that I don't normally find in porcelain. I also have my banding wheel here. It's marked with 6 sides, so I can cut little divots in the bottom of my cup and place this in the center of my banding wheel. Make sure it's centered by spinning it. Oftentimes take a piece of clay and make like little coils for the mold to stick to so it doesn't slide around my banding wheel like it's doing this morning. And there we go, it's nice and stable. So I'm going to take my slab and I'm going to drape it over my mold. What I like to do is make this sort of fold because I know I'm going to be cutting off clay and I know there's going to be extra. So I'm folding that in and pressing it on either side. It's a nice little profile. I have an X-Acto knife here, and I'll be cutting out a sort of silhouette or cutting around the contours of the cup. I'm going to leave a little bit of space at the bottom so I can fold that over. Thankfully, my slab is really soft still, so I don't have to slip and score. So what I can do is, let's look at this camera. Press it again and fold that clay over. I'm going to try to smooth that out with my wooden spoon here. On the other side, I've been collecting wooden spoons, wooden spatulas, something really small like this. It's a little more intimate than a standard paddle. They're really nice to have and it's really lightweight. So what I can do get this clay nice and evened out. Ooh. I'm gonna do this to the other side. I like working on the banding wheel and hand building because I can go through my process from start to finish and not have to wait for it to dry, wait to flip it over and trim. I can get everything done in one sitting sometimes. So I'm gonna add a bit of pinching texture, add a little bit of flair back into my cup. I like seeing evidence of the hand-on clay and the hand-built texture that we often try to erase when we're brewing and hand building. So this is nice and on and stuck. I can take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut around the bottom of my cup or the bottom of my mold. This part's super satisfying because it comes out as a clean line. So this would normally be for a tumbler, but we're gonna turn this into a mug today. I made some tools out of Sculpey, like a scratch tool. I made a little flower on it as well for a little flair. And I'm going to scratch the outside on the bottom of my cup, around the top here.
Bree, we have a question here. How thick is your slab?
My slab is a little bit less than a 1/4 inch. I'm trying to work thinner, so this is where I'm at right now, but I want to go paper thin, and I'm sort of experimenting to see how warped it'll get in the kiln if I add glaze and like other textures to it. So 1/4 inch is good. Change the top, and thankfully I have some excess clay pre-wedged, thankfully. I'm gonna make a coil out of this. For my foot, I'm making a foot. For my foot, I'm gonna roll a coil that's maybe also a 1/4 inch thick. I know I'm gonna have excess later, but more the merrier. Scratch again, just to get it nice and snippy. I highly recommend storing, like when you throw storing that slip that's around the bucket into a little container. That's great slipping and storing slip. And I'm gonna cut a clean edge. I'm just gonna stick this on to the bottom of my cup. And this coil is also very soft, so I don't have to scratch that up. And what I'm doing right now is sort of pinching the outside of my, this ring I made. I'm gonna move closer to this camera. So I can even it out. I can fuss around and see how thick or thin I want the foot after I've added it to my cup. And I can always cut off the excess, which I will do in a second. Oh, cool, this coil is cooperating. So what I'm gonna do now is smooth out all the slipping and scratching that I made on the inside and the outside of my cup. I'm just taking my finger and going around. I'm spinning it around like I would be on a wheel, or like I would on a wheel. I do like using a little bit of speed on this banding wheel. I love shrimp rolls. And I can take this mud tool sponge here. I love to use this on white glaze, sometimes red glaze, and I can smooth that out further. So now I can take my X-Acto knife. Gotta sit down for this one. And I can go across the top and make a clean line, or cut off that excess that's stored on the top. I also made signature stamps out of Sculpey. Here's my signature. I'm gonna use that after, actually I'll use it before I cut my divots on the bottom of my cup. I'm gonna stamp my clay now. And following the lines that I previously made on my banding wheel, I can cut a sort of V on 6 points of my cup. I haven't had issues with it being wobbly, and it's something I can sand after if it does come out uneven. So I'm gonna do that. At this point in the studio, I would normally have like podcasts. I rarely listen to music in the studio. I like just hearing people talk, but without having to talk myself. It's like story time. And so going back to the sponge I had earlier, I'm gonna wet it a tiny bit more.
Bree, do you use slabs for your bisque molds as well when you're making those?
This one, well, these molds are actually made from coils, so they're super thick on the inside and like raggedy, but I can add coils to the outside. These are coil pots.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna take this, my tool sponge, and I'm gonna sponge going outwards and downwards. There's a little bit of water, but I'm not too worried about that yet. And I can clean up by going on the outside again. I'm gonna sponge going inwards as well. And repeat that cleaning process. So if I'm in the studio, I would like to wait a couple of minutes, maybe half an hour max, for it to like really set and be able to like pop off of the mold. But here we have it. I'm gonna show the inside on a tiny bit of red clay, but I was able to capture these sort of fingerprints that I made, little divots, other divots. And it looks like teardrops on the inside of my cup. I have a nicer one here. I don't know if y'all can see that. So, after putting this in my wet box and leaving it for maybe 2 days for up to a week, I have a cup. Like I can make tens of and 20 like cups in a single day with using the same mold. The bisque mold will absorb the water in the clay, and yeah, it will absorb the water in the clay and it will release over time. So I'm moving this back over here. I'm going to take this cup that I've already prepared, and I'm going to center this on my banding wheel. And I have a sure form here. These are also sold at Home Depot. I've had this for 5 or 6 years now. And I'm going to sure form the top of my cup. I want to do this before I introduce this sort of fluting that's happening and petal formation that's happening. My goal is to make the top even and preferably flat. But if I can't do that right away, I'm not going to stress it because I can always sand it on the table. I can always sand it down. I'm going to even this out a little bit. So before I start cutting into the top of my rim here, what I would like to do is create a lip. And I found that using a hard rib, like I have one that's harder than this, but I like using this yellow rib here to sort of lay that clay down. So I'm holding my hand on the outside of my cup and I'm just guiding the rib on the inside. And I'm going to sponge it out afterward to make it a little bit smoother. Getting those little clay burrs off. Clay is super sticky today. I also usually have a big fluffy brush or a mop brush to get all of these clay burrs out. So when you're making your cup, you'll find that you have a seam, kind of this line here. I found that a really stiff, short bristle brush usually works for clearing up that line because I don't want to put my hand in the cup. I want to keep my hands out of the cup. That's why I made the mold. So I can smooth that line out on this cup. And even after I've tended to the rim. Okay. So I'm going to go back to this white sponge and clear that up, smooth this out. And I can always go back, keep doing the smoothing until I get the right lip look. I'm holding my rib at a 45-degree angle when I make this lip. And being careful not to stab or poke the other side of the cup. Smooth in. All right. So now I'm going to center this again, and I'm going to follow these lines that I made on my bending wheel again to mimic that fluting. I want to make sure that the bottom of my cup is lined up with this, with the banding wheel, so it looks like a continuous and thought out process. I'm going to grab my X-Acto knife and have another seat. And I'm cutting more bisque into the top of my cup. And I'm going to take my sponge and do that same smoothing process. What I'm doing is I'm closing up that line, or a line that would have been made with the X-Acto knife. I don't necessarily want to use a brush because it can distort that, the shape that I worked to create. And it softens it just a little bit. So at this point, I'm gonna smooth this out just a little bit more. At this point, I would make a handle for it, and I would wax the outside of my cup to prepare it for inlay. I just recently learned how to do inlay, but I love drawing on pots, which is something that I've never really explored before this residency. I have a tumbler that I've made, and I've covered it with Forbes wax from High Water Glaze. I've had this for like 5 years, and I'm just getting through a third of it. It's awesome stuff. And I bought this book after I did an internship at Women's Studio Workshop. It's called Plants and Flowers. I like to look at botanical gardens and like botanical drawings, scientific drawings, flower anatomy. And I'm really interested in this evening primrose plant. So I normally freehand my flowers, and I can show you how I do that. I just use a number 2 pencil. I usually don't study the flower before I draw it, because the more I think about it, the more likely I'm not going to like it later. And I'm gonna draw a flower. I'm starting with 4 circles. And I'm gonna draw a little.
Bree, can you talk, Bree, could you mention again what the wax was and why you put it on the surface of the pot there?
Yeah, I'm using Forbes wax. This is a water soluble wax that can be watered down depending on your preference. I put it on the top of my pot, the outside of my pots, to protect it from absorbing this wash that I'm going to use. So if I put this on the outside of the pot, it won't dry out as quickly, and I'll be able to get more surfaces out of it. And I can scratch the surface to do inlay or to dry it out a little slower.
So this is the first step to an inlaying technique.
Right. This is the first step. So I also learned how to do inlay with a marker. As you can see, there are some scratches happening here, and not everybody would want that. So you can use a marker, and let's draw a cute flower. Or somewhat cute. This will burn out, and it'll burn out, but I'll still be able to keep that shape for when I want to do my carving with my X-Acto knife. You can use a pin tool for this process, but for a sharper line, you won't be able to do, well, you may not be able to get the results that you would like without a sharper line that you would get with an X-Acto knife. So what I'm going to do is just carve into my flower. Weber hard clay is a little bit hard to carve into, but this is something that you really want to take your time with. I like to add some shadows by doing hatching marks, which is just like a crossing pattern. And the more cross hatching I do, the darker and deeper the color will be. So it looks like a bunch of lines right now, but when it's fired, it'll be a shadow. One more. So, oh, hold on. So I have a mix that I found on glazy.org. It is a little bit of cobalt oxide, manganese, and red iron oxide. A lot of water. I'm gonna give this a nice shake. I would also recommend using a 50-50 mix of cobalt carbonate and earthly borate. That's what I used on these cups, but this is something I'm trying out, so I can't share this recipe yet. Might have to do some modifications. And I have this very soft bristle brush here. I don't know what the name of these brushes are, but they're kind of like, I love them. There's a ton of them in my studio. I would recommend also using any soft bristle brush that you have. You don't want to use anything too hard because you'll sort of spray up that wax and you'll get the color where you don't really want it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this on my brush. It's super watery, and just going to tap that in. I don't want to actually brush my cup because I'll be brushing my wax. This wax is water soluble and it's a little bit finicky when you add a ton of water.
And Bree, what's the best kind of brush to use for inlaying washes like this?
Just a soft bristle. I would use like a smaller hockey brush, like a 1-inch hockey brush for this. I used to have one. I should probably look for it.
Yeah, bamboo brushes or hockey brushes.
Bamboo. Yes, that's the word I was thinking of. Thank you. So you can let this sit for a few minutes, but I like to wipe it off right away before it dries. Oh, I have a yellow sponge here. I forgot to bring my little yellow sponge, so I'm just going to use this big one. And I'll wipe that off. Oh, I took everything. I'd be very careful about wiping it off. It may not look like there's a lot of residue here, but the wash is deposited in the lines that I drew. I'm gonna do that. Yeah. Let's see if I can use a smaller sponge or this mud tool sponge.
Hey, Bree, we have a question here. Somebody's asking about where you bought your stain. I believe you made it here at Clay Art Center. So can you talk about that recipe again and what exactly the wash is?
A wash is just a watered down version of an oxide that you can use to paint on over glaze or under glaze. I use a 50-50 mix of earthly borate and cobalt carbonate with I don't know how much water, but I try to make it super watery. I would measure around 50 grams of each and fill this sort of Talenti container with full water and see how that works. I'm just running out here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And we have about 5 minutes left, Bree.
Oh boy, oh boy. So this dried out a tiny bit, which is also good. I'm gonna try wiping off my wax, my stain with this sponge. Oh, much better. I found that this residue kind of sticks around after I fire it. No matter how much you wipe, you might still have to wax. I mean, to sand. Sanding is very relaxing. And there you have it. So normally I would also go back and do a little bit more. Yeah, this is a little bit vague right now. I want to add more details, more stems, leaves, something. And there we go. So I would normally let these dry. Actually, I'm not very good at letting my cloth dry slowly. So I would recommend drying them lightly covered with plastic. Like so. Folding it over, putting it on, and then I'm done.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bree. So
Thank
before
you.
we wrap up, can you maybe show everybody, one thing I didn't mention yet is one of you guys there at home are going to actually win one of Bree's mugs any minute now. So you want to talk about what mug we're giving away today?
So I have this mug here that I've made from my bisque mold, my previous bisque mold, and I did a bunch of fluting. I did an evening primrose with this cobalt and Gersley borate inlay, and I'm excited to give this away.
All right, folks. One quick thing before we lose everybody. Reminder: this Saturday, we have our third cup demo and giveaway with Zoe Sheeler. So we're very excited to have Zoe join us on Saturday, 11 a.m. So please come back for our third cup demo and giveaway. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you, Bree.
Thank you for coming.
Right. Have a nice day everybody. Bye-bye.